I've been waiting for this program for, well, I think the first day I became your president. And so I'm glad this time has finally arrived. And I will have Maria Tringali, one of our members, introduce one of our other members, Anna, and to present this wonderful program and some excellent information that I think all of us could take advantage of or be more sensitive to. So, Maria.
Thanks, President Paul. It's my pleasure today to introduce my friend and fellow Rotarian, Anna, rhymes with Wanna. Liotta rhymes with Iota. Anna and I met in 2005 when I did our new member orientation. Since then, we've enjoyed a great friendship that has included Rotarian events, business events, as well as personal activities. She's awesome. So Anna is an award-winning speaker, author, and business consultant who has shared the stage with President Bill Clinton, leadership guru Tom Peters, and the like. She has a deep understanding of how generational demographics and dynamics can affect the landscape of business success and contribute to business failures. Her book, Unlocking Generational Codes, which she'll be signing in the lobby following today's meeting, is on the recommended reading list of UW's MBA program, U.S. Navy Senior Leadership, and Bank of America Leadership Training. Anna holds a master's degree in interpersonal communication. She consults, coaches, and trains companies, both global and local, from Microsoft to Windermere and New York Life to Graham & Dunn. As one of 19 children, Anna grew up in a household of 6 generations, giving her an insider's view into generational communication. So for her, every Thanksgiving, graduation, wedding, funeral, baby shower is a doctoral level course. Please join me in welcoming Anna Liotta.
Did you know that no matter what generation you're in, when you entered the workplace, the generation before you thought that you were rude, that you dressed unprofessionally, that you did not have a work ethic? So if it's nothing new that the generation before us thinks that our generation has some challenges, why are we hearing so much about the generations today? You can't open a newspaper or go online without hearing something about the generations. Well, for the first time ever, we have 6 generations alive, and 4 of them are actively competing and collaborating, but frankly, all too often, colliding in the marketplace. And for the first time, leaders are being required to understand what makes each generation tick, but perhaps more importantly, what ticks them off. Sometimes you think you're doing a brilliant job of closing that sale without knowing that you're getting on the very last nerve of the person that you're trying to create the relationship with. Gen Xers are always surprised when they're trying to cut to the chase, get to the bottom line, create some value, when the baby boomer or traditionalist that they're trying to create relationship with thinks they're being abrupt and rude. So it becomes really important that you understand what is the code of the generation, the person that I'm speaking to. What shaped their values, their attitudes, their beliefs, their motivators? Let me give you an example of this code that I speak about. As you heard from Maria, yes, I am one of 19 children. I'm the 18th girl. I'm the 18th child, and I'm the baby girl. And you can probably imagine that when we get together for family events, it's always a potluck. So a couple Christmases ago, my bonus mom and I call her my bonus mom because she's much more than just a stepmom. We lost my mom when I was 10 years old, so I call her my bonus. We were making lasagna for that family meal, potluck, and we covered it with tinfoil when we were done, and we took it off to my sister's house for the dinner. At the end of the night, the lasagna was gone because she's a good cook, and I was washing down the lasagna plate. What do you think my bonus mom, who's 90 years old, was doing with the tinfoil? She was wiping it off and smoothing out the wrinkles, right? She was folding it up and putting it back in the now clean lasagna plate. She was operating with a generational code. Her formative years of 8 to 18 were all filled with the Great Depression and World War II. And so she, today, makes decisions that are still based on the events and the leaders and the icons that she saw in those years. What we know about knowledge studies is about 7 years old, our brain begins to create logic. And so in the years of 8 to 18, it's very significant who we see as leaders, what events and icons we're watching. Because when there's an experience and it's paired with an emotion, it creates an imprint. The higher the emotion, the deeper the imprint. And we will reference for the rest of our lives those events and those imprints when we're making choices about who should we trust, who should I follow, who should I believe and buy from. And so today, we're going to help you understand some of those imprints of each generation so you can understand their code, just like it's important to honor my bonus mom's code. Now, some of you are probably wondering, Anna, how did you get into this? And as you can imagine, yes, it is part of that family story, which is so rich and helps so many things. So I want to share a little bit with you because many of you requested. So my mom married her high school sweetheart. She grew up in Montana, and ladies, hold on, she had the first 10 children by the time she was 28. Catholic. Now, her sweet husband was the oldest of 13 children, Catholic again. And at 30 years old, he had a congenital heart issue no one knew about, and he passed away, widowing my mom with those 10 kids. So she picked up, drove over the 4 mountain passes to settle in Spokane, Washington, and got involved in St. Aloysius Cathedral Church. Any St. Al's people in the audience from Spokane? So St. Aloysius. Now, the nuns and the priests watched over this nice young widow with all the kids. Meanwhile, my father, because I'm not part of the first 10, grew up in Boston, in the North End, the Sicilian section. And he had come out after World War II because he'd seen the Northwest with the CCC camps, and he came out to be the golf pro at WSU. Now, he always said, I'm never going to get married. I'm a confirmed bachelor unless I meet a nice young widow with at least 8 kids. No, of course, be careful what you say because it may come true. And one Sunday after church, some priests from Spokane, Washington, drove the 60 miles south to Pullman, Washington to play golf with those priests. And they were talking after golf about this problem they had. They said, we have this nice young widow, and we've got to find her a husband. And the priest from Pullman said, well, what's wrong with her? And they said, oh, nothing's wrong. But she's got 10 kids. Who in their right mind is going to marry a woman with 10 kids? But they said, we've got the perfect bachelor. He's always saying he needs to have at least 8, so let's set him up. So they wrote my father a letter. Dear Mr. Liotta, we have a nice young widow in our church we think you might like to meet. Now, my mom's last name was Bird. So they said, we know that 10, she has 10 kids, is a high score in golf. But we think since they're all little birdies, it will help make up for that high score. Now, Dad received this letter, and he called up the priest, and he said, are you serious? And the priest said, yes. So he says, okay. So then they called my mother, and they said, Jody, we have this nice bachelor we think you might like to meet. And she said, oh, no, thank you, Father. I'm not dating. I'm a new widow, but no, thank you. And so they called my father back up and said, pick her up, Friday, 7 o'clock. So he drives up to Spokane in his new Cadillac convertible, right? With the big blue fins and the newfangled electric windows. And he pulls up to the house. She doesn't know he's coming, so she's got all the kids there. And he opens the door, and she's apologizing. She says, I'm sorry, I told Father no. I've got all the kids. But the bachelor that he was said, no problem, we'll take all the kids with us. So their first date was 10 children piled into his Cadillac convertible down to the Zips Burger joint. Now, Dad, being naive, said, okay, kids, anything on the menu you want. And they proceeded to eat him right into a mortgaging of his car. But they get home that night, and Mom thinks, the moment I got upstairs, that man hit the door. But instead, he was inside doing the white glove test, looking in the cupboards in the kitchen, seeing how she kept house. And when she came back downstairs, she sat down on the couch, and he says, so will you marry me? says, in my mind, I'm thinking, this man is either crazy or a godsend. But I am leaning towards crazy. She says, no, did you see those children they come with? This is a package deal. But he said, you're the one. So for the next 3 months, he courted and wooed her every time he took her out. He asked her to marry him. And finally, after 3 months, she said, okay, listen, I'm going away. When I come back, if you ask again, I'm going to say yes. So she came back on a Thursday, and he said, how about Saturday? So they got married at the Saturday evening mass. The kids preceded them into the church. And about a year later, they had a cute little girl. And then another 2 years later, they had an adorable, oh my goodness, this one was so cute, artistic license of the storyteller. But then 8 years later, my younger brother came along. And so my father, wanting to celebrate this wonderful family, decided to take Mom on a big trip back to East Coast, to Boston, to visit his relatives, and then see some of my older sisters who by now were married and had children of their own. By the way, I think I win this. I have 56 nieces and nephews, and 27 great nieces and nephews, and the last one was born just a week ago. So this room we call Christmas dinner. It's a very comfortable size to me. So Mom and Dad go on this beautiful trip, but on the end of it, Mom wasn't feeling so wonderful. So when they got back home, they went to the doctor and they did a number of tests, and the final one they did was a CAT scan. It was a newfangled thing. I was wondering at 10 years old, what will happen when a kitty cat walks on my mom? Didn't get that. But they found the pancreatic cancer. And the doctor said, Jody, it's not good. We're so sorry. And Mom called Dad to her and she said, I do not expect you to live the rest of your life alone. She said, I know what it's like to lose your life partner. And there's a perfectly wonderful widow right down the road from us. That was her very best friend in the world, Corrine. We lost Mom 2 months after her diagnosis. And about a year later, Dad and that perfectly wonderful widow were at a church social and began talking. They dated and married a year later. She brought with her 6 children. Now we're getting the numbers. And they were married for 31 beautiful years and shared with us so much wisdom and love. About a month ago, as I shared with you a couple weeks, we lost my father. And he inspired in me the passion for understanding the wisdom of each generation's gifts, for understanding and being inspired by knowing what the next generation brings and how they can be of service. That's how I got into my life work, is taking the gifts of my father and the lessons of him and trying to bring them to others. So today we're going to look at each generation. You saw in your chair when you arrived that there was a little handout. And on it, it has the basics of the 4 generations we're going to focus on, the 4 that are in the marketplace, or the workplace, I should say, most actively. And we're going to go through quite a bit of information, but I've also put on there a couple of other resources because our limited time today really won't let us to dig in as far as we want, but I will definitely let you know where else you can go to find out more. So our traditionalists are our most senior generation actively in the marketplace, and they currently fill up about 7% of the workplace. They were born between 27 and 1945, and our traditionalist formative experiences were of economic hard times, where having food and a job was a privilege. Our traditionalists are always thinking about the greater good, what's in it for the we. They banded together with their GI generation brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles to create a legacy to hand on. They also grew up on the mantra, discipline saves lives. And many times when I have younger audiences, I spend a lot of time on understanding and appreciating why discipline is so important to our more senior generations. Because they knew when you followed the rules, everyone stayed safe. Now our baby boomers come in, born 46 to 64, they're 42% of the marketplace workforce right now. And our baby boomers entered in 80 million strong. We had a birth boom. Now this meant that baby boomers overwhelmed, influenced every institution and organization they entered. But they also were told that they were the bright, shining future of the country. So they grew up incredibly confident and optimistic. But they also grew up incredibly competitive. because everything was kind of like an ongoing game of musical chairs. Boomers knew that there were never quite enough chairs in the room for every child. So when the music stopped, you did what you had to do to get your seat. So everything for boomers became quite competitive, which for Gen Xers gets on their very last nerve. They would like to say frequently their favorite word, which is, seriously? Does everything have to be a competition? Just tell me what you want and by when you want it, and then get out of my way. Gen Xers don't like to be managed, and they don't like to manage others. But our boomers, who grew up on the mantra of never trust anyone over 30, thank you, an honest room. Lately, people have been saying 40, which kind of makes the point. Boomers are forever young, and in their mind, it's very important to know when you're marketing to them that they are somewhere about 30, because the people over 30 are not to be trusted. So boomers will be in a meeting and they'll say, you know, people our age. And at the meeting table is someone in their 20s, someone in their 30s, someone in their 40s, and someone in their 50s, and then the boomer speaking. So it's really important when you're marketing or serving a boomer that you be very careful not to use that R word. What's that R word? It's an old, thank you, it's an old word. Don't say retire. Boomers are not going to retire. They're going to renew, re-energize, reinvigorate. They're going to go on to their entrepreneurial encore, but they're not going to retire. So our boomers have made a huge influence on every institution, but they also had the first round of Gen Xers. Now our Gen Xers are only 44 million ever born, so we go 80 million down to only 44 million. And they are our first generation of latchkey kids. Both mom and dad entered the workplace, and so our Gen Xers spent more time alone and the least amount of time with adults of any generation. It makes them very neurotic, let's be honest. A little nervous about networking. They're not comfortable. When they come into Rotary for the first time, you see them like deer in the headlights because they're nervous. I'm going to have to make small talk. They spent time alone plugged into a computer. Computers were not yet connected. They plugged into the wall, and that was it, right? So they spent a lot of time alone. And for our Gen Xers, they were also the first generation of broken homes, with the divorce rates tripling in their formative years. By the time they were 16, 75% of their peers were living in a broken home, and it was still partially the kids' fault. It was still something that was an onus on them. And instead of being the bright, shining future that the boomers were in the high post-World War II time, Xers were our first generation to be told, you've put the nation at risk. They even wrote a report on it. And so Gen Xers mostly will never say, I'm a Gen Xer, because it was said with such disdain. They think they're the only one out there experiencing life the way they did. So oftentimes in my audience, they'll be thinking, oh my gosh, that's totally me. How did you know? What did you do? Follow me around? But what Gen Xers really care about, and when you recruit them, you need to know this, is their next door babies. They're kids that are 13 years and younger. They make every decision based on, will this be good for my child? Right down to if they go out to spend $25 on dinner or go to a movie, they're thinking, if I do this, it's money I'm not going to put towards my next door baby's education. It's money that's coming out of that budget, and I don't know if I care. So if I'm going to invest my time in becoming a Rotarian, how will that not only advance my business, but create the opportunity for my children? Xers base everything on how it affects their children because they want to have real time with their kids. Both mom and dad entered the workplace when they were young, so they spent very little time with adults. Now our millennials come along, and they're 76 million strong. So we went 80 million down to 44 million, and now we're back up to the 76 million. And they have entered in incredibly confident. Their parents told them, you are a precious gift from God. And they said, yes, I am. Just ask my parents, they'll tell you. Now, our millennials have come in being told that they are unique and special and having a really close relationship with their parents. Because many times their boomer parents were on their second family. In golf, we call that a mulligan family. So the boomers were now going to do it right. They had a little friction and fraction with their Xer kids, so now they're going to have a wonderful relationship, and they're going to put every resource in front of their millennial children, and they're going to be really involved. They're going to be helicopter parents. They're going to hover over every decision and every activity and make sure their children have great self-esteem. Now, what does that mean? It means that millennials expect to have quite a lot of access to you because they've had fans and they've had coaches and they've had BFFs in their parents. And you're about the same age as their parents. You look a lot like their parents. So why aren't you going to love them, like them? Just look at how Facebook is structured. What do? You say, I like that. So millennials expect that they will have an awful lot of liking going on. Which brings us to the first thing I want to talk about, application. Now, on the bottom of that handout, you'll see that there's a white paper that you are welcome to download. I made a special one just for the Rotarians. But of course, if you'd like to hand me your business card, I would happily honor that method of getting the white paper as well and get one to you. But we're going to move into some application. One of the things I'm most frequently asked when I consult or coach executives or companies is, Anna, how much feedback do I need to give? And how do I give it? When do I give it? It seems like they want it now, 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 now. Well, it is one of the most important things because the number one reason that people report leaving an organization is because they didn't feel appreciated. So can you afford to have someone leave just because you didn't give them the feedback? Now, I understand our traditionalists and GI generation operated on no news is good news, right? My father always said, if I'm not yelling, you're not in trouble. Now, that wasn't quite enough for our baby boomers who had 80 million peers that they were competing against. So they said, I need a little more. And they thought it was really successful when they got the annual review instituted. Once a year, you sat down, you had formal documentation and stats and data to back up how you were doing against your peers. Our Gen Xers, remember, they're a little neurotic. They're constantly worried about how they're doing, so they want you to tell them right after the performance or the activity, how did I do on that? Now, our boomers and traditionalists said, wait, let's get back to the office, let me write it down, I want a desk between us, you over there, me over here. And the Gen Xers saying, no, informal, off the cuff, from the hip. But do not fluff me. Do not tell me something you don't mean. Because if you give a Gen Xer an undeserved compliment, it makes their ears want to vomit. They cannot believe in you in the future. You lose credibility if you tell them something that's not true. Now, our millennials grew up with constant kudos and feedback and attagirls. Their parents made sure, the first generation of pop psychology, that their kids would know, I'm okay, you're okay, I'm just so proud of you for trying. Not even getting the job done, just trying. Think about it. The last time you heard of a sports banquet, how many kids were getting a trophy? All of them, that's right. Now, before you get miffed at the millennials, who bought the trophies? That's right, the baby boomer parents bought the trophies. So we have a situation where millennials are coming into the workplace with the expectation that they're going to give a lot of feedback. They're going to, on day one, hear you say, I see your potential. What a great effort you gave. And so when you are giving feedback to a millennial, you want to think from the paradigm of the teachable moment, because they never actually got anything wrong. They just needed to get it a little more right. So you want to give them, here's what you're doing well. I'd like you to do more of that. Here's what's not working and producing the results. Please do less of that. And then finally, here's what I would like you to keep doing. That's about at the right pace. So you want to start with more of, less of, and then keep going. Now, another area that the generations show up is in the sales conversation, the relationship building. How do you take your generational style and shift so that you can be effective with someone of a different generation? For our traditionalists, the relationship began in a very formal protocol. Most likely, you were going to be introduced by someone of their similar rank or tenure that they already respected, who gave their personal credo that you were okay, that you should be listened to. Now, when you go into that first meeting, you're going to wear a suit and a tie, dress in the dress code of the person that you're speaking to, and you definitely call them by their title, or at least sir or ma'am, until invited to call them by their first name. This one is something our millennials are having a lot of trouble with because their boomer parents didn't want to be called Mrs. or Mr. because it sounded like their parents, and that sounded old. Exactly. So they said, no, call me by my first name. So in the sales conversation of training that I work with lots of organizations on, we actually have to go back to the basics, which is a key thing about the sales cycle. Now our boomers, they want to have quite a lot of time to develop the relationship. They want to tell you all about their passions, what they love, their kids, and their millennial kids' amazing accomplishments. And this gets on the very last nerve of Gen Xers. There's a cycle boomers go through. They like to meet and network at associations or charity functions. They like to set a time to get together to have coffee or lunch, then discuss the coffee or lunch, and then review, rinse, and repeat. Meet, network, get together for coffee or lunch, and this can go many, many times. And Gen Xers are screaming inside because they just want to cut to the chase, get to the bottom line, create some value, and move on. They don't know that for traditionalists and boomers, they are occurring as rude, abrupt, abrasive. I have a Gen Xer client who actually has a really cool niche. I was doing some executive coaching with her, and she said to me, Anna, I cannot understand. I have this great product. She has a JD from Notre Dame and an MBA from Stanford, and she helps professors, minority professors, and women in the sciences get tenure. So she's got this really great niche. She said, but I can't make it past the door of the provost. I don't know where our new provost is, but that's who she talks to. And she said, I don't understand. Why do they keep sending me away? So we talked a little bit about the Gen Xer style of trying in the first 5 minutes to start talking business. Let's start talking about the numbers. And I said, you actually need to shift into the style of the person that you're serving. So she said, the next time I went into a meeting, I sat down and I said, you know what? I've got no agenda. Let's just hear a little bit more about your mission. Tell me a little bit about your vision. She said 20 minutes into it, I was breaking out in a cold sweat because we hadn't talked about business yet. She said, but at the end of the meeting, something new happened. They invited me to a social event. I've never been invited to a social event before. And she said, but more importantly, the next time my invoice crossed that provost table, it was signed without question. And they started referring me to other provosts, and I started getting invited places because I wasn't being so rude and aggressive. She said I had to shift from what I thought was value, from my generational style, into the person that I was seeking to serve. And that's a really key thing. Now, when it comes to our millennials in the sales cycle, they're on multiple channels and multiple platforms. Yes, they will come meet you at the social function because they love the social thing. They grew up with it. They've played on teams since they were in diapers. They're very comfortable with it. But they'll also pull out their cell phone and they'll start Facebooking and tweeting and checking out with their friends and their parents and their BFFs and their followers who you are and if they like you and if they should know more about you. And they'll do that sitting right next to you, talking to you and looking up, which again, if they're trying to woo you, they're breaking a code because that is disrespectful to the person of another generation. But they'll be right there. So if you're wooing them, you want to remember one of our mantras in Generational Savvy. It's not personal. It's generational. You might leave today and start to notice something as you go back out to your offices. It's what I call a generational moment. When somebody is doing something that before you might have really thought that was just the way they were kind of rude, they were kind of aggressive, but now you notice, you know what? That's so Gen Xer. They're just cutting to the chase, getting to the bottom line. And you're going to want to notice as that generational moment comes up that you keep it on the internal dialogue, not the external. They're not going to think it's funny if you go, oh my gosh, I totally get it. You're an Xer. They'll be like, I'm not. But what you're going to notice is it will show up, kind of like when you first bought a car. Do you remember before you bought the car, you researched it, you looked at everything, you chose the color, and then you drove the car off the lot. And what happened? You saw it everywhere, right? Everywhere you turned, there was your car. You're going to go out today and you're going to start seeing generational moments everywhere. You're going to see, oh my goodness, I totally get it. I always thought that was the way they were. But now I realize it's not personal. That's a generational opportunity. Now, what you can do and how you can turn it to your benefit, you might be sitting there thinking, I'm kind of starting to wish there were some other people here that could hear this. And when you go out from today, you'll have a couple of resources, but I've also set aside something very special for the Rotarians. If you now can see some generational moments or ahas, and you'd like to talk about how do I apply this, I've set aside some Rotarian time over the next couple of days in the lobby. If you'd like to visit with me a little bit and say, you know what, how about what if, I'm happy to do that and answer your questions. But I want to leave you with this one last piece that's probably the most important point of the day. There's one thing that all the generations have in common, and it's a really key piece. What we all have in common is that we crave, desire, seek respect. We may not agree with each generation's code. We may not have had their formative experiences and the same imprints. But if we're seeking to deepen a client relationship, we're seeking to validate, engage, and keep a top talent or leader around, if we are at least open to understanding, to respecting their generational code and why they approach it the way they do, we'll be so much farther down the road of having a distinct competitive advantage and being generationally savvy. Thank you so much for your time today.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.